Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our fourth and final week of drama at JCAL. I've had a lot of fun with you over the past 3 weeks discussing the different types of jobs in the theater. And I hope if you've been tuning in previous weeks, you've been learning about the job of an actor, a designer, a director, and a playwright. And yeah, this is our final class for today. And today we're going to be focusing mainly on the job of the designer. Our first week, we talked about being a playwright, and we experimented a little bit with the elements of story, what it means to write a good play, two-person play with dialogue. And then in our week 2 class, we talked about being a performer, and we learned a little bit about creating characters, how to change our voice and how to change our body so we can play people that are different from us. Last week was about the focus on being a director and how much of a leadership position that is, learning about how to utilize different types of stages, because that's the director's playing space, is the stage, and figuring out how to best tell that story using whatever type of stage you have and how the audience is placed. And this week we're going to be talking about the designers. So let me just screen share here with you real quick, so you can see my PowerPoint. Here we go. Okay. So yeah, this is our final week. Kind of bittersweet because I've had a lot of fun teaching with you guys. So yeah, this is our main agenda. Like I said, we're going to be focusing on designers, and there are a few different types of designers in the theater. There are set designers, costume and prop designers, lighting designers, and sound designers. So we're going to be exploring each of those jobs a little bit today, and you guys I'll give you some tips as to how to do some design elements on your own when you're in your house quarantining. If you have nothing to do and you want to try this out for yourself, I'm going to give you some extra tips on how to maybe try out some design elements yourself. So yes, so for our review, right, this should be familiar to you by now if you've been joining us for previous weeks. There are 4 main branches of theater that I've been breaking down for you guys. Again, we've got our international symbol for theater in the middle there. We've got the 2 masks with the happy face and the sad face. That comes from Greek drama, when actors in Greece used to wear masks, not only to show emotion, but also to project their voices because they didn't have microphones back in the day. And those 4 branches you can see are actors, designers, directors, and playwrights. And last week we were talking about directors. Those are some examples of directors that are in rehearsals, in different types of stages. They're talking to the actors about how they should move, what they should say, how they should say it. And they also talk to the designers, right? That's our focus for today. Our first picture there looks like some very trendy costume designers who are working on some costumes for a play. In the middle, that's, I think, a really good example of great set design, because that tree there in the middle was created by a set designer and helped, they built that from scratch specifically for the play, which I think is really, really cool. And then it's also on the right, you can see some elements of lighting design as well. Yeah, you can't see sound design on any of these pictures, but you can maybe assume, look at that picture in the middle and think about, oh, what sounds maybe are playing if you were watching this. Maybe some jungle noises, maybe some music of some sort, some kind of magic-y music. So those are some examples of design in their final forms. So the director that we talked about last week is mainly in charge of hiring their whole design crew, right? So they hire the actors, right, by holding auditions, and they hire designers, not through auditions, but usually interviews. You know, if you're a set designer and you're coming in and you're really interested in designing a set for The Sound of Music, you come in and you meet with the director and you talk a little bit about your background experience. You probably have a paper resume that you give to the director. And then you try and present yourself in the best way possible. Why are you best for the job, right? And sometimes directors that have worked with certain set designers or lighting designers before often bring them back on for a new production. So it's really important to maintain those relationships when you're a designer, because oftentimes you'll be hired again and again by the same directors for different kinds of projects. So it's really important once you get into the business to really maintain those connections. Try and keep up a good rapport with the people that you've worked with, because they'll get you jobs in the future. And that's true with any kind of job, not just a job in theater. Any kind of job. If you put your best foot forward and you're professional and you do your job right, that'll often lead to other opportunities that are even better. So that's just a business thing to keep in mind. Let's assume that you're a designer and you've got the job. You're going to be working with other kinds of designers, and you're all on a team, right? The team is led, obviously, by the director in terms of vision, right? What they want to see the final production to look like and sound like and feel like. But the other designers you're going to be working with are kind of like your other crew members. And sometimes you're going to be the head of the leader for other people underneath you. So oftentimes a set designer has carpenters that they are helping to direct, to put certain set pieces together, right? Sometimes a costume designer has a costume assistant, or someone who is helping sew the costumes and put them together, right? There's also someone called a stage manager, who we're not really going to talk about today, but they're also kind of in charge of, when the production is happening, making sure that all those design cues, like the lights going off and the sound coming on and all of that, goes according to plan. Great. So those are all the design people. So let's say, yes, you're a designer, you've been hired. After a design team has been assembled, the director is going to hold what's called a design presentation, okay? So they're going to have a big rehearsal right at the beginning of the process, and it's usually, sometimes it's a read-through of the script with all the actors, and then it's followed by all of the designers presenting their ideas for what they want to contribute to the production. So that's over there on the right. That's a picture of possibly a design meeting happening right there. You see they've got some photographs there on the table, and those are probably some visual examples of what the designer wants to show to the rest of the team, because to explain their idea for what they have for the show. So let's get more specifically into what each kind of designer is presenting, right? So the first person that I'm going to show you is the set designer, right? And the set designer, of course, controls everything pretty much that you see that happens, that's on the stage constructed, right? So it doesn't have to do with the actors, but it has to do with the place, right? Really establishing the location of the piece. And sometimes a play has multiple locations. So then they have to take into account, okay, how are we going to transition to make this room turn into the outdoors, right? So those are all things that a designer needs to think about and plan, right? So on the left there, you have a picture of the set designer, and he's got a model, a set model, right? So it's basically a mini version of the stage that they're going to be playing on. If you remember from last week, I think that type of stage is a proscenium stage, right? Because it's got that arch, proscenium arch to it, and the audience is only facing one direction. Obviously, the model would look a little bit different if he had a show that was going to be in the round, right? Or a traverse stage, or a thrust stage, right? You'd have to take all of that into account, depending on where the audience is located, right? He doesn't want one of those big pillars to block half of the audience view of the stage, right? So that's a proscenium model right there. So he's going to bring that in for his design presentation. He's going to say, okay, this is what I want this to look like. This is the scale for how tall I want these pillars to be in comparison with the actors. In the middle there, that's a drawing, a technical drawing of how everything is laid out. He probably did the drawing first and then started working on the model afterwards. And then on the right there, you'll see this is another set designer who has what looks like actual people that are also trying to set the scale for how big things are in comparison to the people, right? So at home, if you would like to try out your own example of set design, you can think about the play that we wrote together in our first week, right? Or something else, some other kind of play that you really like or have written yourself. And all you need is a cardboard box like this, right? Usually a shoebox is best. This one is a motor oil box. I don't know, I found it in my basement. But oftentimes you can just find a box about this big already lying around in your house, right? And this is your perfect example of your model for your proscenium stage. Yeah, so we've got all the way down stage here, upstage in the back, stage left, stage right, etc. And you're going to fill up this space, right? What do you want to have in your set? What kind of place is this? Where is your play set, right? And then you'll have, moving pieces. You'll have pieces that stay the same the whole time, right? It's very similar in school, like if you've ever created a diorama before, right? Or you've made your own dollhouse, something like that, right? It's a really fun process to do. And then you can also draw pictures of what you want to do first before you actually get into the design of it. Everybody's process is different, but that's what you can do on your own if you want to try out some set design. Great. So I'm going to share screen again. That was an example of a set designer. Now we're going to move on to the costume designer and props master. Okay, and we've got some visual examples here. So the costume designer is in charge of how everyone on the stage is dressing. Okay, what everybody is wearing in this piece. Now, if it's a period piece, which means a play that's set in a certain time period besides the present day, then they're going to have to do some research on how people dress during that time. If it's that picture in the middle is a costume design from The Sound of Music. So they're looking at like Germany and Austria and people from that part of the world during when The Sound of Music is taking place. And then they've also got, if you see in that middle picture, they've got examples of fabric swatches, what they're called. So they're taking, pieces of different textures and colors and saying, well, this would be a great color or a great texture to use for this character's costume. Okay. And then that third picture there, those are some examples of some strange looking props. So the props master is in charge of everything that the actor holds or interacts with that they're not wearing, okay? So the big difference between a costume and a prop, right? If the actor is wearing it, it is a costume, okay? So if it's a hat, if it's a jacket, if it's a pair of pants, it's a costume. If it's something that they hold or interact with but do not wear, such as a coffee cup or a cell phone or a pencil, right? Those are all props. Those are all props that the props master is in charge of, okay? Great. So if you want to try one of these things at home, you can make your own costume design for yourself. This is my drawing that I did the other day. I haven't done a lot of costume design myself, but I do like to draw. So I drew a fairy costume. I haven't finished it yet. But I've got a little top and a flowy skirt. I was thinking a black skirt and top because maybe this is a kind of mischievous dark fairy instead of a good fairy. And she's also got these stockings on right here. And so in the production meeting, I would present this picture to the whole team, and I'd say, okay, so for the actor playing the fairy, this is what I'm gonna envision you wearing, and then they get to work on actually putting that together. They need to get the measurements of that actor who's playing that fairy, and then start working on the costume. So that is costume and props design. Usually a props person, a lot of props are already in existence. So oftentimes they don't need to make props from scratch, but they do need to go find them and buy them. So usually they have a budget that they're given, you know, $100, $200, depends on how much money the production has. And then they go out to whatever it is, an antique shop or a thrift store, or a Goodwill, whatever it is, and they scour all of those shelves and things to find the exact thing that they need, a certain plate that needs to be broken on set every night, or a certain kind of, I don't know, tablecloth that's really important for the story somehow. So if you're a person that likes to go into thrift stores and kind of like find little things that look really cool and, you know, get them at a good price, maybe you should consider props design. Great. So that was prop and costume design. So now we're going to move on to lighting design. Okay, this is often an element of design that people don't really think about that much, but it's very, very important to telling a story. And it takes a lot of technical skill as well. So on the right there, that black and white design is called a plot, a lighting plot. So it's from a bird's eye view, so it's looking down onto the stage from above, and it's showing you the three like lighting the availability for where the lights can go. So different kinds of lights have different purposes. They create different effects, different colors, things like that. And this is a very technical way of showing how those lights should be placed in order to get the effect that you want. Okay, they can create effects that are really powerful, such as the picture that you see there in the middle. Everything is really blue and it's kind of got this sad and like maybe dangerous element to it, right? And you can see shadows and all of that. All those are created solely from lighting design, which is really, really cool. So this is kind of an area I know the least about, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. There's plenty of stuff online if you want to Google lighting design, if you think that's really cool. But something that you can do if you want to try lighting design for yourself is find some lights in your home, right? So I've got my lamp here that I have on my desk. And this is a really useful light because it's very small, but it's very bright. So it can create all kinds of effects, and you can experiment with, because it moves, depending on which direction you put it, how that affects the person being lit, okay? So if I'm gonna light from the side here, that creates a different effect than if I'm gonna light from above, right? It looks like I'm telling a scary story if I do that. From below, right? And then from the side, that's different. From above, that's also a different effect. And then, this is really cool, if you have any kind of colored paper, like tissue paper, you can put that over, and that'll create a color effect. So now I've got kind of a blue I know my camera's not great. You can see it's kind of got a blue tint to it now. So, and like we said before in that picture, blue kind of looks like somber kind of feeling, right? So let's try out one more color here. I think I'm going to try red this time. I've got red tissue paper. I'm going to see how that effect is. Ooh, look at that. Really different from the blue, right? Cool. Yeah, and then you can play with angles on that as well. Wow, look at how dramatic that is. Oh man, okay, that looks scary to me. I'm gonna take that off. And then, play with lack of light too. If you turn off that light, what does it do to tell the story that's different than if the light was on, right? So all kinds of options you can play with. Everybody has lighting, different kinds of lights in their house. Play with whatever lights that you have accessible to you, right? Really cool. Lighting design is awesome. Great. So the last kind of design we're going to talk about is sound design, okay? So the sound designer is in charge of everything you hear on set, on the stage, basically, aside from the actors that are speaking. Sometimes actors have microphones in a really big space, or if generally in a lot of Broadway musicals, they have microphones that are attached to their bodies. So the sound designer is in charge of all of that, making sure there's no feedback, making sure the actors can be heard. But they're also in charge of all different other kinds of sounds too, such as sound effects. So if there's a part of a play where there's a big car crash that isn't seen on stage, but you hear it, right? Sound designer would need to figure out how that can be heard by the audience. Okay, what does that exactly sound like? Oftentimes too, there's music either in a musical, or there's music during transitions in between scenes. So a sound designer needs to figure out what kind of music is the best kind of energy for that. So in the pictures there, you'll see the sound designer is up in a booth that's away from the stage. They've got a big keyboard there, which controls all of the different sound effects that go on and off. And they need to be paying attention during the show to make sure that they get those sound cues right. Yeah, so oftentimes, if it's a smaller show, a stage manager is the one who calls the cues and says ready, go. But the sound designer, creates those sounds that are going to be heard. And then I don't really have anything much to share with you for how to try sound design, except that if you go on YouTube or you go on the internet, you will find every sound imaginable. You'll find examples of them that are pre-recorded. So if you need a sound of a baby crying, you can just type that in on Google, baby crying sound, and it'll come up, and it's right there for you immediately. You can also, if you really like music, you can check out, explore different types of music and how they really inform the play that you're trying to put on for yourself in your home. So yeah, my only example for that is Google it. Sound designers also have to think about if there's a song that's a very well-known song that the director wants to use in a show. Oftentimes there are some legal issues with that because a song has rights. So they either have to approach the person who wrote the song, or like if they want to use a Jay-Z song, they might get sued if they don't tell Jay-Z that they're going to be using his song in their show, because that song belongs to him. It was created by him. So they have to go through copyright issues so that doesn't happen and they don't get in trouble. So oftentimes sound designers use what's called royalty-free music. They don't need to pay royalties on the music because it's free to everybody who wants to use it. So that is sound design. And usually, yeah, so in a big design presentation, that's what each designer will show to everybody in the meeting. And then after that initial meeting, we get into the design process. And this is basically the equivalent of the rehearsal process for actors, except on the design team, they're working on all of their projects that they presented from that rehearsal. So that first picture there looks like a costume fitting, right? That fairy costume that I showed you before, you know, it's an example. It's a little bit different than my drawing, but I would say that the man in the glasses is the costume designer, and the person wearing the outfit is the actor. So they're having a costume fitting, and oftentimes the main thing is that, you know, you want it to look good, but you also want to make sure that the actor is comfortable and can still move and talk comfortably in that costume, because that can be a really big issue if the costume doesn't fit quite right and it inhibits the actor's performance. So that needs to be communicated between the actor and the designer. That middle picture is what looks like set designers who are creating the set. They're working in their studio, what's called the design shop, right? The set shop. And they may have it may be a team of set designers, right? Other carpenters or set painters, right? Who are all working together. That last picture, you can see that's probably a sound designer or maybe a lighting designer in their booth. And maybe the set is being worked on at the same time that the sound and lighting designer is testing out the light board and the sound board. So that's a process that goes on simultaneously as the actors are rehearsing with their director on the line and the story. So then after rehearsals and design, you know, is happening, and that you know, you get closer and closer to opening night. The week before opening night, you have what's called load in. So that's a big day for designers because they have to bring in everything that they've worked on. So all of the lights have to be hung. So that's the first picture you see. Those are crew members who are putting up the lights on the grid on stage. The set has to be loaded in. So you'll see there on the right, that's being constructed from scratch. And then after load in happens, the actors can come in, they can get on their costumes, and they start rehearsals with all of those design elements in place. Because oftentimes all of those other rehearsals have no design elements in them, right? It's just the actors and the director with the script that the playwright has written. So Tech Week can be a very exciting time for everybody because everything's finally coming together. It can also be kind of a scary time because then that's the time you realize, uh-oh, something's not right, you know, and it's leading up to opening night, so you have to change something at the last minute. You know, either, I don't know, lots of things can go wrong. I've been in lots of shows where, you know, you realize at the last minute, oops, this is not going to work, we have to change this. So it's really about thinking on your feet and making those changes so that by opening night, you are ready and your performance, your show has opened, the performance is a success, and all of those design elements are working greatly in tandem with those performance elements. So the actors are doing a great job in character. The set looks great. The lighting really enhances the set. The sound design cues happen on time and really inform the story. And hopefully everybody is really happy with this collaborative process. And the show is not only a great thing to be a part of, but audiences love it. So that's the ideal process for how a show should go. So that about concludes everything in terms of design that I'd like to talk to you about today. And this concludes our final and fourth week of drama with JCAL. If you have any other questions about theater, or you're wanting to know more about some of the things that we've talked about and learned over the past 4 weeks, you can, the internet is a great place to learn about all that stuff. So you can Google mostly any of your questions about theater and they will be answered. There are a lot of great things on YouTube right now, which are live filmed performances of plays, Broadway shows. I know the National Theater has a lot of live streamed productions now for free, especially during quarantine. That's a great thing to be doing to pass the time besides watching a movie, is seeing something live that's been filmed. And you can also feel free to reach out to JCAL if you have a question specifically for me about my career and my experience as an actor and a person in the theater. So you'll be able to be connected with me through JCAL if you have any inquiries about that. Thank you all so much. I hope you're staying safe, you're staying sane, you're staying stimulated and in good spirits during this strange, bizarre time, and truly wishing you the best and maintaining your health during this time. Have a wonderful week, and I hope I can host another one of these videos very soon. Have a great week. Bye-bye.